is our author and guest of honor, Charlie Jane Anders, who is here with us at CanCon. And obviously, yes, to those of you on the internet who will see this at some point, I don't know when. So I'm Brandon Crilly. I'm one of the programming leads here for CanCon, and an Ottawa-based author of science fiction and fantasy and a bunch of other things. But you are not here to see me. You are here to see Charlie Jane, who's the author of a ton of incredibly wonderful, amazing things. And
you're here to see both of us.
Oh, really? Oh, all right,
yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Okay, we're both awesome.
Both awesome.
To degrees. Yeah, so we're going to cover a bunch of stuff. You might notice a little stack of books here that I will refer to at some point. Ooh. No pressure. So what I normally do for these interviews is we'll go back and forth a little bit, and then there will be time for audience questions if you have any. And then I've warned Charlie Jane that I like to do a rapid fire thing at the end. It's just like whatever the first thing is that comes to your mind, which I may have.
This is going to end horribly.
It's going to be great. It's never gone badly, okay. Except what I did with Jim Butcher. Which was actually at Confusion, which is where we first met, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay.
On that Magic Systems panel years ago.
That was super fun.
It was so much fun. I don't expect you to remember.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Yeah, no, it was good. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, okay, cool.
But yeah, so no pressure on that. But I may have stolen it from Larry King, don't tell him.
Okay.
But yeah, so first thing I want to ask you about, so I was given a review copy of this. Which is Lost Transmissions, The Secret History of Science Fiction and Fantasy, which was put together by a friend of mine, Desiree Naboskovich, and I was flipping through it and I was like, oh my god, Charlie Jane is in this.
It's such a fun book.
It is so
really
cool.
Looking through it. It's all this really cool stuff.
Yeah, and so yours is about this show, Space Island 1.
Yeah.
Which I have never heard about before.
Oh
it
my
sounds
gosh.
amazing.
I feel like there's two kinds of people with reference to Space Island 1. Well, mostly two kinds of people. The people who've never heard of it and are like, what the hell was that? And the people who are like, oh my god, that show was amazing. Like,
yeah.
I feel like my conversations about this show fall into those two groups. And it makes me really sad that whatever happened with that show, it's not available on DVD.
Yeah.
It's not available online to watch legally. If we talk afterwards, I can tell you how to watch it.
Okay.
Without necessarily going through legal channels. But it's basically a show that's impossible to find through any kind of legit means. And it's, people who watched it generally seem to agree with me that it's an incredible show.
Yeah.
And, it's sad because when I first got into it, I was like looking at the internet presence for that show. And basically there was like one website where somebody was rambling about how he didn't really like it because it wasn't action-packed enough. And there was like one really kind of incomplete episode guide. There wasn't a lot on the internet about it.
Yeah.
I actually tracked down the creator at one point and tried to interview him for IO9, and he just didn't even want to talk about it anymore.
Really?
And I don't know, it's too bad. Backing up slightly. Space Island 1 is this amazing show about a space station orbiting Earth. And it's, a little bit like the ISS, but it's owned by a corporation, which is a big part of the show's kind of ongoing conflicts. And it's a show that doesn't really have any aliens or gunfights or chase scenes or, there are some explosions here and there, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just about a group of extremely flawed people up in space dealing with just being in space. And that's kind of the story. And I would say there were 2 seasons, and I would say half of the episodes are amazing, and the other half are range from good to But that's a pretty good ratio for a lot of TV shows.
That's not bad.
And I don't know, it's a show that works really, really hard to be scientifically accurate.
Right.
I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't know 100% how close it gets, but the science is very, very, very strong. Mm-hmm. The characters are extremely smart, resourceful people who don't do dumb things for the sake of moving the plot forward. And it's just got some really, especially the second season has some really interesting storylines. One of the characters has a baby.
Right, you mentioned this in the...
Yeah, and there's a whole thing of it's the first baby born in space, and it's kind of almost the property of this corporation that owns this space station. They want to turn it into a mascot, and it's this super intense, weird thing about the first baby born in space. And there's also this really, there's this one character, and I'm going to spoil it very slightly, there's this one character named Lyle, who's sort of the lovable geek character who you kind of in the first season you just want to wrap him in a giant hug because he's this adorable nerd who builds these cute robots and is just and runs this hydroponic garden that's beautiful, and he's just like this sweet soul. And then the second season, they did this really interesting story with him where he finally gets a girlfriend who's also an adorable nerd.
Nice.
And over the course of like this 2-episode storyline, he just slowly starts sabotaging her and undermining her.
Oh, wow.
It's more complicated than that, but it goes to a really dark place and takes this character who you love and shows that he is capable of being a total flaming asshole.
Wow.
And it's done so fucking well. It's incredibly well done. It's a really great show. I love that show so much, and I wish that it was out on DVD or available to watch in some form.
Yeah.
Like, you know, properly. I feel like there should be like an amazing box set. It was like a U.S., Canadian, German co-production or something.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I think the rights are probably tied up in limbo or something. It was shown. It used to be shown on public television in the U.S. all the time. They would show it back to back with Doctor Who, which is how I started watching it. I was like, well, there's this weird show that's always on before Doctor Who. I guess I started just catching the last like 20 minutes of each episode, being like, oh, this is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh. And I sort of went from being like, oh, it's that weird show before Doctor Who to, oh, it's that amazing back-to-back, like, you know, these two amazing shows back-to-back, and like they're really different from each other, but I love them both.
Yeah.
So yeah, I highly recommend it. I think it's okay to say this. It's on the first season is on archive.org.
Oh, okay.
So, and
Writing that down.
I think archive.org has like a really good track record of presenting, you know, content, you know, in a fair use way. So I think it's all good.
Sweet. Yeah, it'd be different if there was a DVD out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's like there's literally no way to watch it other than just go to archive.org.
Yeah.
Like I said, uneven. Some episodes I'm not as crazy about.
Yeah.
But, there's another storyline. Like, so in Space Island 1, sorry, I could talk about this show all day.
Do it.
In Space Island 1.
I'll just throw this
So there's the lovable nerd character Lyle, who you for the first like season and a half you think is just like the most perfect human being and just adorable and awesome, and he's always butting heads with this kind of gruff, older American astronaut.
He's the only American in the show, right?
Yeah, I think so. He's
like
Walter Shannon.
Yeah.
And he's like this kind of stereotypical American jerk. And over the course of the show, you kind of learn to kind of see the humanity in Walter, the annoying American guy, just as you're learning to see that Lyle can be a total, you know, asshole.
Yeah.
And Walter has a couple of amazing storylines.
Okay.
One is that he suffers bone density loss, which is something I've never seen portrayed on television before. He's done 1 million missions for NASA. He's been in space for, you know, a combined total of a few years, I think. And his bones are basically just brittle.
Yeah.
And he has to work out constantly to try to keep his bone density up. And it's just something that's like constantly dealt with in the show. And then the other great Walter storyline is that he is super lonesome and basically racks up an insane bill calling phone sex lines on Earth, which, you know, this show was made in the 90s, so I don't think that they would have that anymore. They would change it to something else.
I wouldn't know from personal experience, but I don't think that exists anymore.
I think phone sex died when the internet got to be where it is now.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's just basically like he is using like the station's resources and trying to like sneakily call phone sex lines for like hours, and he gets caught, and it's like a whole thing.
Yeah. For my students in the audience, just pretend like we're talking about something else.
Anyway, cool.
That's amazing. So, can we geek out about something else?
Sure. Yeah.
You're a
of course.
huge Doctor Who fan, right?
Yeah, I am a huge Doctor Who fan.
And I was looking when I was doing my research for this. I was looking at your tweets about like Doctor Who plots that you want to write. And the one that struck me was Doctor Who and the decreasing marginal utility of the Weeping Angels.
Aww, I felt mildly guilty about writing that one because that one's actually kind of true.
It is. That's why it caught my eye. Because
Yeah.
you can only really the Weeping Angels are terrifying, and I love them. But you can really only use them so much.
Yeah.
It's like, so what? Like, can you tell me what that episode would be? Or
I mean, I do a thing on Twitter where I occasionally post joke Doctor Who titles, and it's like a running thread that goes back a couple of years. And I actually, when I get a minute today, I was thinking of tweeting Doctor Who and the Scones of Ottawa, because that sounds like a classic Tom Baker adventure. We've got to get the scones of Ottawa. Anyway, because the scones are amazing in Ottawa. Anyway,
Scone Wish specifically.
yeah, I love that place. Anyway, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like that was just me being snarky and a little bit, you know, about the fact that like, yeah, the Weeping Angels are amazing, but like the more you see of them, the less amazing they are. It seems like.
It kind of loses some of the fear.
Yeah, it's like a lot of other things. It's like the Predator. It's like the Xenomorph from Aliens.
Yeah.
Like when it's just like something that kind of looms in the darkness and you kind of see it occasionally.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, damn. But then when it's something that's just like kind of parading around and like you're getting to know it and learn about its weaknesses, and like the Weeping Angels in particular, like they kept changing their power set, which kind of bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, it always, because it starts off, they can just pull people back in time, and then it becomes something a little more complicated, right?
I mean, it becomes both more and less complicated.
Oh,
They start just like breaking people's necks.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They
Yeah.
start just like, they're like, sending people back in time is too much work, we're just gonna like break their necks.
Can't send everybody back in time.
You're going back in time with a broken neck.
Do you think there's a way to amp them up a little bit and make them more?
I mean, God, if I was, I actually am not sure. I mean, I think that, okay, so.
Let's do it.
This is going to tie in with another thing that I'm very exercised about, which is that there was a Doctor Who spin-off called Class.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I watched it religiously. I feel like...
It's on my list to watch.
Okay.
But I saw it and was like, oh my God, it looks amazing.
It unfortunately did not get the viewership that it deserved. It was a great spin-off.
Yeah.
It was like, it had all these like interesting themes. It had like a queer couple. It had like, one of the school teachers turns out to be like an evil killer alien, but she can't kill for complicated reasons.
Okay.
And it's like, it's such a cool show. And I'm going to just spoil the ending of the first season. Sorry, it's been a couple of years.
There's a statute of limitations, it's fine.
Yeah, so the first season of Class ends with this giant reveal that like the big bad behind all the things that have been going wrong at the school is the Weeping Angels. And they're kind of like behind this sort of evil conspiracy of school teachers and stuff. And I was like, that would have been interesting if they'd managed to make season 2 of Class and got to sort of have the Weeping Angels be these like shadowy figures behind these evil teachers who are trying to open like an interdimensional thingy. That would have been awesome, and I would have that would have been a return to like me being interested in the Weeping Angels. I feel like, but unfortunately the show was axed after one season, and it's we'll never know. I mean, maybe sometime the actual main show will like finally get into that. Yeah, the Doctor Who thing I really want. Like, there's a bunch of Doctor Who things that in real life I would kill to write.
Yeah.
Like I have like a whole file of ideas that are just like sad. Like I'll never get to write those ideas. But one of the things I'd love to do is like some kind of comic book or maybe novel where Captain Jack and the Brigadier spend a lot of time together and basically probably fall in love. I mean, I should just write this for an actor. I just want Captain Jack and the Brigadier to be happy together. Because there was this whole time in the 60s and 70s when they were both around. And, Captain Jack couldn't reveal himself to the Doctor, but he could hang out with the Brigadier.
Yeah, why not?
When the Doctor wasn't there. And they could butt heads because they're both trying to save England from aliens, but then out of that blossoms like chemistry, and like the Brigadier has a mustache. It writes itself. It just writes itself. I don't know.
No, I love it. Well, was Paul Cornell who reached out to you online about writing Doctor Who? Was that a thing that happened?
He did. I mean, that was super amazingly generous of him, and I love Paul Cornell. He's such a cool guy.
Yeah.
He did tweet it, like one of my wacky Doctor Who things that I tweeted. He was like, that sounds like and he actually tweeted at me and the BBC Books editor, who I think never like engaged. Like I think, I didn't want to like I didn't want to like be pushy, and B, I have like my stack of projects that I've got to finish is like up to the ceiling right now.
Okay, fair enough.
So I was like, in theory, I would love to write a Doctor Who novel, and in practice, I would love to write a Doctor Who novel. Maybe not in the next year.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I've got this young adult trilogy, I've got other stuff that's on the back burner. And blah blah blah.
I ask a lot of my interviewees this: how do you handle that massive stack of like?
I mean, I wish I knew. It's hard.
Strangely, that's the answer I usually get.
I mean, it's basically like, it's this thing where you want writing novels to be your job, to be your day job. And then it is, and then suddenly it's like, this thing that I was just doing for passion in my spare time is now the thing that I'm doing for a living, and if I don't get this novel done, I don't pay my rent. And it's a different kind of thing. I always joke that like, now that I'm writing novels full-time, or more or less full-time, I'm my own boss. And my boss is an asshole. My boss is like, why are you working? Why are you working right now? You should be writing novels. God, what are you doing? Why are you watching television? You spent like 15 minutes in the shower. You could have had that would have been at least 5 extra minutes of novel writing, kind of thing. My boss is like very, looks over my shoulder all the time.
Holy crap.
So that's a lot. But anyway, I don't know. I mean, It's just, I mean, the way that I ought to handle it is that if I have a bunch of projects that are kind of all, you know, I'm trying to finish, if I'm like not feeling moved or inspired to work on one project, I can just work on a different one, which that's the ideal. In practice though, it's like, okay, there are certain projects where I know I have to get it done sooner.
Right.
And like, I have this young adult trilogy, which I'm still in the middle of writing book 2, and then there's book 3, obviously.
Right.
And until I get book 2 done, I'm really not going to feel super, you know, in a good place about my life.
Yeah,
so,
I hear that.
So anytime it's like, well, I'm kind of feeling stuck on book 2 of the YA trilogy.
Yeah.
I could go work on this other adult thing, but I'm just going to keep plugging away at this thing because I want to get it done.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And it's due in the spring, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, we have that deadline looming that starts.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I was looking up this article from the Washington Independent Review,
Okay.
which paralleled your work with Octavia Butler in terms of.
Wow.
I don't know if you saw this or not, but they paralleled it in terms of the predictive nature of your work.
Oh wow.
I have my notes here if you want to look at it.
Oh no, it's okay.
Yeah. So I was curious, do you think of your writing as predictive in any way, or do you intend your writing to be predictive, or is that just kind of like a happy?
I mean, predicting the future.
I think is what.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that the ways that my work is predictive are kind of unfortunate because you know the things that I predict about the future are things that I wish weren't true. Like I predict climate change.
Yeah. And look at where we are.
You know, I predict that because it's obvious. It's already happening. It's definitely going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you know, in our lifetime, it's going to be really scary and awful.
Yeah.
I predict some form of like, you know, the unsustainable systems that we've built giant Jenga piles around us are going to start teetering more. I think that I predict that. I mean, I also predict that people are going to come together and that we're going to work together to solve our problems, and that we're going to find solutions. I'm not like completely dire and dismal, but generally the things that I predict are the things that like, it's like if you see, you know, if you see a horrible accident about to happen from across the street, you're just like, that's the extent of my prediction. It's more just like pointing out the obvious and going like, you know, why don't you do something about this? Because like it's like happening right in front of us, and it's but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, I mean, it's very common to say that, you know, speculative science fiction doesn't really predict the future. It's always about the time when it's written.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, good storytelling set in the future at least contains a kernel of like, this is where I legitimately think we're going, and this is like, and this is how I think we can deal with it. And like, I think that there is a certain value in trying to imagine, even if you get it wrong a lot of the time, there's a certain kind of value in trying to imagine the future, because that's a way of preparing for the future.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Does like being compared to somebody like Butler, and in that same article they compared you directly to Ursula K. Le Guin, and
I have no pressure.
Yeah. But does that sort of thing freak you out as a creator to be compared to these like great historic individuals in sci-fi?
I mean, it was so when my new novel, The City in the Middle of the Night, which I wish I had a copy of with me.
Yeah, me too.
when that book came out, there was an incredibly generous. I mean, okay, backing up slightly. The City in the Middle of the Night, my new novel that came out in February. It's, you know, it owes a huge, like, obvious debt to Le Guin, like, and Butler.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like, you know, steal from the best. Like I say, I definitely stole a lot from Le Guin in particular in that book.
Yeah.
Or you know, was heavily influenced by Le Guin.
Yeah.
And I was super chuffed when I got a couple of different quotes from people I asked to read the book early, like blurbers.
Yeah.
A couple of different people blurbed it by comparing me to Le Guin. I was like, oh, well, they got what I was going for. That's good.
Oh, good.
And then the book came out with the cover that like has the pull quote, "This generation's Le Guin," from like Andrew Sean Greer, who just won the Pulitzer Prize, and it's just like, so you know, his opinion kind of matters and stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I got a little bit like freaked out because people kept referencing that because it was right on the cover of the book, and they're like, oh, well, you're this generation's Le Guin, and I'm like, I finally had to put out a tweet, you know, back in February, I think, where I was just like, you know, there's only one Le Guin. Right. This generation's Le Guin is the same Le Guin that we had like last generation and the generation before that.
Yeah.
There's only one Le Guin. I'm hopefully my own, you know, somewhat inferior but still hopefully good
Right,
thing.
like, yeah, like your own
But
creator.
you know, there's no way that I could be, you know, the next Le Guin, because Le Guin will continue to be the Le Guin.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, there's a balance to be struck between, you know, owning your influences and you know, wanting to build on the best stuff that you read when you were coming up.
Yeah.
But also just wanting to be your own thing, and like I feel like, you know, even apart from like the kind of intimidatingness of the thing of like you're the new, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's good for marketing, and
Yeah.
you know, I do like to sell books, so that's
Yeah,
good.
well, obviously, yeah.
But you know, even apart from like the intimidatingness of that, it's just like ideally I would like to have my own kind of like brand or whatever.
Yeah.
Where I'm not just I'm doing my own thing, and it owes a debt to what came before.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you find that readers are always decided that we either maybe dwell or reference back too much to those greats that came before?
I mean, I think it's really important to acknowledge your influences, and it's really important to acknowledge the authors that came before, especially, you know, women authors and,
Obviously, yeah.
you know, marginalized authors of all types. I feel like, I think that, you know, I mean, it's interesting because 100 years ago, you could reference like Wells and Verne and stuff, but there wasn't like the same wealth that we have now of just like masses and masses of amazing books, including some that people have forgotten, which really shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of authors who, especially a lot of women authors of previous generations, who kind of get swept under the rug, and I think it's important to acknowledge what's been done in speculative fiction up till now, and like not to just be like, you know, I came up with all of this by myself. You know, I'm the first person ever to write about alien planets or whatever. You know,
Can you imagine
and
something like that?
I think there probably are people out there who, you know, but yeah, I mean, definitely that's like the knock-on for people who come in and don't really know the genre and are just like, oh, I came up with a good idea. What if there's robots, but they're actually nice or whatever, you know? So I feel like, you know, it's important to acknowledge that. I also do think that, you know, even at 100 and whatever, I mean, however, I guess 200 if you count Frankenstein as like the first science fiction novel. Even at 200, I think that this is a pretty young genre. And I think that it's too soon to just be saying, well, you know, everybody's just iterating what's been done before. I think that it's good to see some hunger and some ambition to kind of at least try to find stories that, you know, areas that haven't been explored enough yet. Stories that haven't been kind of told a million times at least. Like, you know, just finding new spins on the old stories at least. I think that that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask you a little bit about your short fiction?
Sure, yeah, of course.
So, my very first CamCon, Catherine Kramer was here with this anthology, Hieroglyph, which they were promoting, which is the first, I think it was before we were calling it solar punk, but it's kind of the first solar punk, hope punk anthology that I ever came across. And Charlie Jean has a story in it called The Day It All Ended, which is about, and correct me if I'm summarizing it correctly, but is about basically a corporation, or sorry, an individual who works for a corporation in kind of media relations, right? And he shows up to work and he's about to quit because he thinks that the corporation he's working for is just horrific and terrible and they're ruining the planet. And then he finds out that actually the corporation has been planning for 20 years to like switch on all of their tech in cars and homes and basically force everybody to be using clean energy and, you know, more friendly to the environment. It's just like, and the consumer has no control over it. It's just snaps like that. And they need this guy not to quit so he can like say to people, oh, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine, and calm down, and you know, like, everything's okay. What I'm curious about with that story is it meant to be hopeful? Because to my read of it, you could look at it as, you know, yes, okay, we're looking at a future where technology, you know, corporations are not out to destroy us and things are going to get better, but you could also look at it as, at least to my read, that people suck. And the only way that you're going to get people on board is to basically force them into it. So I was curious whether you intended to be a hopeful story or not.
It's a little of both. It's kind of, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that story, to be honest. I really like it, but I feel like it was definitely written from a place of like people suck a little bit. And like it's a little bit of a wish fulfillment fantasy of like what if one of these giant consumer electronics companies was like secretly, you know, doing this awesome thing that was going to help save the environment.
Yeah.
And that was like, it's a little bit of wish fulfillment, but it also
Okay.
is like kind of the central message of the story is that people will go, you know, hundreds of miles out of their way for commodity fetishism.
Yeah.
People will, you know, race to buy the next iPhone and get the next like shiny thing that like is both a slight improvement to your quality of life, but also a huge status object or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously at the time I was working with a lot of folks who worked at Gizmodo, which was like the kind of gadget kind of like site. So I was seeing a lot of this kind of, and I think that you know the kind of slightly cynical point in the story is that people will you know do way more for commodity fetishism than they will to save the planet, basically, and people will basically not go to. And I think it's you know it's an interesting point. I also do think that you know increasingly since the story came out, it's become more clear to all of us that individual consumer behavior is important, but also you know government policy is really important, and that you know a lot of the worst causes of climate change are these giant power plants and these giant other systems that the consumer has really no control over. And so it's really about getting out and you know campaigning and voting and working for political candidates who will actually do something about climate change and working against this like massive you know counter narrative that it's a hoax or that you know it's not a problem or that we can just ignore it for another 100 years or whatever. I think that you know I still really like that story in a lot of ways, and I love this kind of sneaky thing that it turns out that all these like apparently kind of slightly useless devices actually have a function that is not apparent to the end user, and that people just basically bought a bunch of useless crap that turned out to be really, really useful in a way that they didn't expect. I thought that was a fun concept.
And I think it's neat because a lot of the tech that we buy does have like it's doing all sorts of stuff that we're not aware of. And so I think it ties into that idea that you know corporations are using this all the time, but in this case it's for something positive.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like I said, I still have a huge soft spot for that story, but it's not my favorite story of mine, I gotta say.
What is your favorite story of yours?
My favorite story of mine is probably still this one that I wrote like a dozen years ago called Love Might Be Too Strong a Word, which you can read online at Lightspeed. It was originally published in Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, which is this magazine that Kelly Link and Gavin Grant put out. And it's about a sort of long-haul spaceship that's heading to colonize a planet, and the crew of the spaceship basically are like 6 different genders. And each of the genders has a very specific, you know, skill set and responsibility on the ship. So it's basically about like a bunch of different genders that are also different kind of classes. And it's like basically conflating gender and social class in a way that is I hadn't really seen done before when I wrote it. And the main character is somebody who kind of defies the gender norms of her, or Burr, sorry, everybody has pronouns. Somebody who defies the gender norms of Burr class and refuses to kind of fit into what everybody else is doing.
That sounds very cool.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like that's like still my most, like that's the story that I would love people to be reading.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I've written that down. I'm going to scope that. Along the lines of like you're talking about like government and you know I guess protest and making government aware that things need to change, which ties into the other anthology I'm sitting over here. Which is Resist, which I believe came out this year.
I think so. It came out in the last year for sure.
Yeah, definitely in the last year. So it's this anthology Resist, which was published, I forget who by, but it contains a ton of amazing stories, including one by Charlie Jane, and all of the proceeds for it go to the ACLU, which I thought was this phenomenal concept, both for an anthology, and the tagline for it is Tales from a Future Worth Fighting Against, which I thought was really, really cool. And your story is basically, in a nutshell, it's about like thinking money, essentially. Like I'm not sure I got the concept correctly, it's software-based money that can basically see what people are spending their money on and say, okay, you're buying it on something illegal or something damaging, we're going to stop you from spending. That's essentially the concept.
Yeah, no, it's basically so.
I mean, that's the tech. There's obviously a lot more going on with it.
Yeah. So basically, it's a story that I wrote years ago, which had been published on Strange Horizons, and they needed a story for this anthology, and I was like, I don't have time to write you a new story, but I have this one that appeared on Strange Horizons, and I don't think very many people have seen it. So,
okay.
So that was kind of, but it's a story basically. I used to have, before I was actually working on IO9, I had a job where back in like it was probably 2005, 2006, I was hired to start a publication from scratch. This is like, I love jobs like this. I was hired to start a publication from scratch about the mortgage lending industry.
Oh, really?
It was basically like a legal compliance like newsletter about mortgage lending.
Cool.
And so it was basically like, you, a layperson who does not have a law degree, and I'd done this before for other topics like healthcare, go and learn everything there is to know about like mortgage lending law.
Okay.
Interview a bunch of attorneys, interview a bunch of legal experts, and then just write this publication about that. It was aimed at bankers, I guess.
Yeah.
About like the legal ins and outs of mortgage lending, and it was right when the housing bubble was starting to kind of collapse, and it was right when all of these like subprime and subprime loans that people had made were kind of going horribly wrong. And so it was a really interesting time to be sort of diving into this industry and learning all about it, the legal ins and outs, and that was super fascinating. And so I was thinking a lot about banking and money and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought of this idea of like, what if there was money that could think for itself? What if there was money that was like self-aware? Which I think is something that is possibly in the future, like some form of artificially intelligent cash.
Yeah.
Is not beyond the realm of possibility as far as I'm concerned, because there's all sorts of ways in which the financial system is trying to get smarter and smarter, and I think that eventually, basically in my story you have e-wallets, which replace regular wallets, and it's like basically just a tiny mobile device that registers how much cash you have or how much money you have, and it's just like it's like you're sort of like your debit card now, but it's smart. It's a self-aware thing. It knows where you are. It kind of, like the machine in Person of Interest, it kind of taps into security cameras and knows what's going on. So it's money that kind of is aware of what you're doing and who you are. So if you try to use it to buy something illegal, it'll just shut down. If you try to do money laundering, it'll call the cops. It won't let you use money for anything against the law.
Yeah.
And basically the arc of the story is that this sentient, self-aware cash starts to kind of question, because it's been told it's supposed to stop wrongdoing, but it's like, well, there's all this other wrongdoing out there, like, these rich people who are, abusing everybody else, and like, why is it that some people have all this money and some people have no money, and like, that seems like that's wrong too, and like, basically the money starts developing a conscience and it interacts with this virus that's been sent to compromise it, but they end up kind of falling in love.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was a fun story.
Yeah, it's an incredibly neat story.
Oh, cool, thank you. Yay.
I was curious because that tagline of looking at tales from a future worth fighting against. Is there something particular in that story that you were fighting against in there? Is there something there that you hope doesn't happen?
I think the thing that's worth fighting against really is inequality, and like that was kind of the thing of the story, was like that it was it's just a worse version of what we have now in terms of like the rich have like basically all the marbles, and the rest of us have like tiny little grains of marble dust or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about IO9, and then I'll open it up to questions from the audience if anybody has any, and then we'll do our rapid fire thing. IO9 is like 11 years old now. Am I correct? Sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, we're coming up on 12 actually. God, that's crazy.
Which is amazing.
That is crazy.
Was there any point?
No, there was no point. There was no point at the end. Sorry, was that a question?
Sure.
No,
there was no point whatsoever.
No, just kidding.
No, I was going to say, was there any point after IO9 started, like with you and Anna Lee, where you sat back and thought, holy crap, this has gotten way bigger than we expected, what the hell are we doing?
Constantly.
Constantly?
Yeah. No, I think it was a thing where like, we didn't know if the website was going to be successful. At the time that we started it, it's hard to remember this now, but at the time that IO9 started, Gawker Media was starting a lot of websites.
Right.
They started a ton of websites, most of which nobody has heard of anymore. Like, there was a website called Grid Skipper. Who here read Grid Skipper? Grid Skipper was a website that was kind of like local reviews of restaurants and stuff. It was trying to be like Google Maps or whatever,
Oh,
I
okay.
think.
Or like Yelp, maybe?
It was kind of trying to be Yelp-esque, I think. I can't remember even. But it was, yeah, Grid Skipper. And like, they had Consumerist, they had Idolater, which was their music blog.
Oh, okay.
They had Fleshbot, which was their porn blog.
Of course.
They had...
I'm surprised there was only one, but...
you know, they had a bunch. They had like One Cat. There was a bunch of like smaller ones that I can barely remember now though, that, you know, lasted like 6 months.
Yeah,
and
like
just,
none of them survived.
no, I mean,
Except
some of
for
them
you.
survived. Consumerist is still around. It's
Is
run
it?
by Consumer Reports now.
Oh, okay.
I think Idolater might even still be around.
Oh, okay.
One Cat is definitely still around. But there were a bunch, they were just starting websites all the time and a bunch of them just didn't go. And so we thought, you know, we might not actually be successful. I feel like, yeah, I mean, it was like the first week
Oh,
the
really?
site launched, we were just like, oh, okay, wow, yes, this is actually, yeah, people want this, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, right away, we had like a pretty amazing readership, but it just, I mean, you know, it was a thing where we knew that we had to work our butts off to keep, you know, keep the weasels running around and, you know, keep the internet kind of turning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely intimidating at times. More to realize that you have a responsibility.
Oh, okay.
Like, because, you know, you start this website and we had this attitude of like, we're just a couple of like queer nerds in San Francisco, kind of like throwing trash at, we're standing on the side of the road throwing, you know, bubblegum wrappers at cars going by.
Yeah.
We're just like a couple of queer nerds screwing around, and like then it's like, oh no, actually people care what we say about stuff, and if we just say whatever comes to mind, like that's not so, like we started to think of it as more like we have a responsibility because we were getting a bigger audience than and so what we said mattered, and like, there you can kind of see over the first few years that we were doing the site that we started getting a little bit more kind of like, you know, I don't know, a little bit more conscious of the kind of the great responsibility that comes with the great power.
Right. I mean, I could ask you like a dozen questions about that, but I am conscious of time, and so I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions in the audience, you have a chance to throw those. So are there any questions from the audience for Charlie Jane? If not, I can keep rambling.
Hi.
Yeah.
Did you want to sort of talk about how over the course of your career, how maybe the topics you write about has changed, or how you access those topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of my fiction, I definitely started out as an absurdist, kind of, and like was, you know, and I'm still sort of think of myself as a little bit as an absurdist, and I was so incredibly grateful when N.K. Jemisin actually called me this generation's absurdist or whatever, when she was reviewing All the Birds in the Sky for the Times, the New York Times. But you know, I think my first several dozen short stories, I would say, were just me being as weird as possible, and me just trying to be kind of weird and strange, and just like kind of like, woo, you know, crazy stuff is happening, and you know, and that was something that I kind of, I really enjoyed doing that, but character was kind of secondary, and you know, making sense was often kind of secondary. I was super influenced by like all these, like in the late 90s when I was kind of first, like I could possibly do this, maybe, I don't know. I was reading a lot of like writers who were just like super, just like wacky, weird stuff happening all over the place. Like there was this guy named Don Webb, who I've never actually met, who lived in Texas, who wrote a bunch of super weird stories.
Yeah.
But just like a bunch of stuff, and like just kind of, I wanted to write kind of like, almost like Monty Python sketches in story form, in a way.
Nice.
And a lot of those early stories, my writing wasn't as good, I think, hopefully. I think I've gotten better. But also, character was coming second, kind of narrative coherence was coming second, and I feel like a lot of those stories were kind of like, not really great as stories. They were kind of like, not really working that well. And I feel like there was a long process of me kind of figuring out how to write emotion and character and personal stuff in a way that was kind of satisfying, and that actually kind of worked on, you know, on a gut level, and that, you know, learning to kind of find that balance between the kind of like, woo, wacky humor and like the emotional stuff. And even when I was writing All the Birds in the Sky, each kind of successive rewrite of that book, each kind of version of that book was a little bit more kind of grounded and emotional than the previous version, and I kept kind of paring back the humor and kind of taking out some of the weirdest, most absurd elements of that book because it was getting in the way of the character stuff, and that's something that, and then you have The City in the Middle of the Night, where I was just like, I'm going to try to eliminate the humor and wackiness completely from this book and see what comes out, and there's still a lot of wackiness and humor in that book, but I was really trying to see if I could really get to that emotional grounded place if I pared away everything else. So that's been a process for me over the course of my writing career, I feel like. Trying to find that balance, trying to find those things. I think in terms of themes, I'm definitely more consciously writing about climate change and environmentalism than I used to be. I think that I approach gender differently than I used to. Back in the early, mid, even late 2000s, I wrote a ton of fiction that was sort of just kind of first-person stories from queer San Francisco about or queer kind of narratives in general, where I was really trying to complicate gender in different ways. Like that story I mentioned before, the love might be too strong a word. I feel like I'm trying to kind of complicate gender, but I'm kind of approaching it differently now, and it's hard to even kind of think how to put that. But I think I'm trying to do it sort of more holistically, I think.
Anyone else have a question? Come on.
Hi.
Sorry, that's I'm telling you there's 5 minutes left. Thank you, Aman. Last call, or I'll do my rapid fire. If you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
let's do it.
Again, so rapid fire, first thing that comes to your mind, short answers. And again, I apologize to Larry King for borrowing this idea. Please don't sue me. So first and foremost, your favorite doctor.
Jodie Whittaker, for sure. Right
Awesome.
now.
Yeah, that's one. They're all awesome.
I always love whoever's the doctor now, but I also just love her energy, her positivity, her kind of just the joy that she brings to the role. I feel like she's a breath of fresh air.
Okay, I love it. Who do you think is the best, or what do you think is the best antagonist in Doctor Who so far? Probably not the beginnings.
I still really love the Daleks. I'm going to stand for the Daleks.
Awesome. Cool. I love it. Most hopeful book that you have read recently?
Ooh. Dang. Probably one of the Becky Chambers books. I feel like, Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, Close and Common Orbit. Her stuff is just it just makes me really, believe that we can make it. I don't know. I love her stuff.
Awesome. That's funny. That's not the first time I've done these interviews and somebody has mentioned Becky Chambers. That's pretty cool. Something you have never written and you don't think you could pull off?
Oh man, there's so many things. Mystery novels are really hard to pull off. I would love to write one day. I feel like when speculative fiction people go in to write mysteries, it's often, there's just so many moving parts in a mystery, and it's so hard. I feel like I would love to do one of those, but I'm not sure. It would be challenging.
Okay, fair enough. This is because we talked about magic systems at Confusion. What do you think is the worst magic system out there?
The worst magic
Not
system?
that we want to slander anybody's writing. But
Man. I don't know. Worst in what way?
Most overly complicated, or most rules heavy, if out there in fiction.
I don't know. I feel like I don't have anything against magic systems.
Okay.
I feel like what we were talking about at Confusion is that you don't have to have complicated rules for your magic if you don't want to. Which I feel like some people are overly prescriptive about that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay,
so I've never actually read these books, so I feel slightly guilty about dissing them. But I have heard that those Robert Jordan Wheel of Time books have this very gendered form of magic.
Very much so.
Which I think would make me break out in hives if I tried to read them. I'm sure that they're lovely and awesome, but the kind of gender-based magic, do not want.
No, totally fair.
Yeah.
Best part of being a writer?
Sleeping in, I don't know, sleeping in, for sure.
Okay, worst part of being a writer?
Not being able to sleep in because deadlines.
Nice. Now, when I wrote this one, I didn't realize that you had returned to IO9 for a guest post this year, right?
Yes, one post, yeah.
Okay, so if you were to return again, what's the first article that you would write, do you think? What would you write about?
Oh, wow.
What would you want to? What would bring you back?
I would love to do something about the state of superhero movies now, because I feel like that's one thing that has kind of moved on so much since I was at IO9, and I think it's really an interesting time for superhero movies. I think that, superhero movies are just I would love to do some kind of deep dive into how they've
Awesome.
kind of morphed in the last few years.
Very cool. Okay. New or up-and-coming writer that you would recommend who you haven't mentioned yet?
Wow, okay, well I'm just going to plug the book I'm reading right now, which is Beneath the Rising by Premi Mohammed, who is a Canadian writer.
Oh, no way!
She's based in Edmonton. Do you know her?
I've never heard of
Okay, yeah, I was sent it for like, you know, as an early review copy or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm halfway through it, it's so good. It's like science nerds. It's this one girl who's a teenage girl who's like a super genius science nerd who accidentally invents like she purposefully invents a super clean reactor that generates limitless power with no pollution, and that summons elder gods from beyond our universe to try to take over the world. It's so good. I love it.
And what was the name of the author again?
Premi Mohammed, Premee Mohammed, I think.
Okay. Awesome.
She's Premisaurus on Twitter.
Okay.
I love this book so much. I'm halfway through it. I'm excited to finish it.
Awesome. And my very last one, one piece of writing advice to leave our audience with.
Just stick with it. Keep doing it. Have fun. Don't forget to have fun. If you're bored, you know, put that thing aside and work on something else, or try to figure out what's boring you and get past it. I actually wrote a thing on IO9 once about the value of boredom as a writer, but just stick with it. Read your work aloud. Find ways to read your work to an audience. Find community. Find a writing group.
Yeah.
Go to conventions.
Like this one.
Yeah, go to CanCon. Go to CanCon.
Yeah, CanCon. All right.
Yay.
So that is it. We're definitely out of time.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charlie. This was a
Yay.
blast.
This was so awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.